the last time I checked, we had over $3 billion raised by startups using the platform.
Today we've got Nathan Beckord from Foundersuite, which is an exciting capital raising platform. Welcome, Nathan.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
A pleasure. Nathan, I'm interested. We're interested. Tell us about Foundersuite. What is it, and how did you get started?
Yeah, I'll start with how I got started. Actually, portion I used to work in investment banking. I was working in JP Morgan's private placement group for a little bit, which was helping startups raise Series B, Series C, larger rounds of capital. And then I came out to California and hung out at Shingle as a consultant to startups, helping them raise capital a little bit earlier stage, seed, Series A, and did that for about a decade, really as a consultant. And then I just kind of had the epiphany one day. It was around the time Mark Andreessen had his famous, software is eating the world quote, right? Where every industry is getting affected or will be affected by software. And that was kind of the epiphany, like, why aren't there tools for this exact job role, raising capital? And there really wasn't anything out there. People using spreadsheets and, a whole bunch of other stuff. So that was kind of the epiphany of what we should build. And so we launched with an investor CRM, so a product to manage a pipeline of investors, just kind of like, you use Salesforce to manage a pipeline of sales prospects. This is similar, but it's for raising capital from investors. And then we've just been adding to it ever since with a database of investors. We've got about 208,000 investors in our database.
Wow.
To help populate your pipeline. And then some other marketing tools like bulk email tools, pitch deck hosting, investor updates. And so we're just going to have a whole suite of tools for, building a target list of investors, managing that list, and marketing and building relationships with investors.
Fantastic. And what makes Foundersuite great?
Oh, that's a good question. I think it's, as I just told you the story, all I've done basically my entire career of 20 plus years is help companies raise capital. So it's got a lot of that just sort of institutional knowledge baked into the product, right? If you hadn't done this, it'd be hard to sort of recreate this from scratch. A lot of little nuances just in labels and titles and way we've kind of structured things. So that's one thing I think makes it great. I like to think, but also it's pretty unique in just being a combination of a database of investors, of a CRM, of pitch deck hosting. We have competitors at each of those corners, right? There are multiple investor databases out there you can subscribe to. There's 1,000 different CRMs you can choose from, but having all of this kind of packaged together in one cohesive system is pretty special, I think.
Yeah, that's great. And how effective is it? Like, are your users getting some pretty good runs on the board?
Yeah, definitely. We're really seeing a lot of growth right now. Before the call, like you and I were talking about, it's kind of fundraising season right now. I think we have about 2,500 startups or so actively using it every month for managing their investor pipelines. And I haven't even done this. We have to pull it from the database, but the last time I checked, we had over $3 billion raised by startups using the platform. So that's probably quite a bit more than that now, because I haven't run those numbers in a while, but that's kind of our big vanity metric, over 3 billion raised.
That's exciting. Yeah, well done. That's definitely effective. And I'm interested, Nathan. There's, in growing a business, and you'll have seen this with your clients. There's always challenges. There's always hurdles. What would have been your biggest or handful of biggest challenges in growing your business?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think we've been around about 5 years, which is kind of a long time in startup land. The first couple years were really a struggle to stay alive. You're putting out a product. We put out an MVP or a rough version of our product that I paid for out of my own pocket for like 30 grand. I mean, it was really, really rough. It barely worked, but it was enough to kind of get the flywheel going. But, we just never had a lot of resources to put into it. So our development timeline was kind of a slow timeline, and we'd lose customers because maybe the product didn't have every bell and whistle they were looking for. So I think the biggest challenge is just the pace at which we could grow and develop. Now, on the other hand, that those constraints, I think, actually helped build in some discipline into our like product roadmap, right? I know I've seen hundreds, dozens, hundreds of companies that raise a lot of money and just spend it quickly building every bell whistle feature, and then it becomes a bloated, hard to use product, right? Whereas if you have resource constraints, you've got to really pick and choose what to build. So it's kind of a double-edged sword. But the first few years, to answer your question more specifically, the first few years were just very constrained until we really got the revenue flywheel going, where we now could reinvest into the business. And there were times where we pretty much ran out of money and couldn't keep the engineers happy for a while, and we're just kind of drifting a little bit and all that good stuff. Typical startup chaos behind the scenes.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like you've kind of been through that journey of a tech startup, and firsthand, you know what that's like.
They are extremely fragile, right? Like you don't see it because everyone puts on a good face. All startup founders are unnaturally optimistic by nature and many times, and of course everything's always going great. But if you actually like look behind the facade, in many cases everything is just about to fall apart all the time, right? For at least until things really kind of get established. And I think that's pretty common, to be honest. So if that's happening to you right now, no, that's pretty normal, I think.
Yeah. And there would definitely be a few listeners who are in that exact situation. Yeah. So hang in there, guys, because as you can see, Nathan has made it through that ugly phase of startup. So yeah, it is possible and it does work.
It gets easier and easier if you just hang in there to live and fight another day, right?
Absolutely, for sure. And Nathan, what's changed in you that's kind of taken you from that, startup ideas, that initial kind of period through to, okay, great, we've actually now got a successful business that, has generated 3 billion in funding for startups. What for you personally, there's obviously been some growth and that kind of thing. What's happened on a personal level for you?
I think these things go hand in hand as the business starts to run on its own a little bit. You can step back as the founder or CEO and be a little bit above it versus always in it day to day. You can kind of have a little bit more objectivity if you're not the one putting out fires constantly, where things are kind of humming along. Now you can start to think a little bit more strategically and worry less, because you're less reactive. You can be more strategic. I think that's kind of a big deal and a big change, and I think is healthy for founders to kind of, strive for that, even if you're not there yet, right? Because otherwise you'll burn out. I mean, you see a lot of founders burn out because it is really brutal, and if you're constantly fighting fires and solving, critical issues constantly, you can't do that forever. That just wears you down. So I think you have to kind of rise above your business a little bit, if that makes sense, and kind of be, above it versus in it all the time. I think that's something that I've been able to achieve, and it feels good, because now I can think about where we want to go next versus what bug or glitch is happening right now.
Yeah, for sure. And so then what advice would you give to other CEOs who are growing their business? They are in that stage of constantly putting out fires and that kind of thing. Like, there's money there, there's cash happening, there is growth, but as growth is expensive, and there's a lot of management issues that happen with fast growth. What advice would you give to those CEOs and founders and business owners who are in that stage?
Yeah. When in doubt, focus on making customers happy, right? No matter what the issue is. Like if there's multiple decision trees you've got to kind of sort through, that's at least for us, our sort of north compass. What's going to make our customers happy? because even if the product isn't, if it's the early days and it's kind of rough, but you've given them such a positive like customer experience because you're really responsive, you're responding back to their questions quickly, that stuff can go a long way, and they might come back later as a customer, even if they churn out now. So, that's, I think, just kind of core principles of like use that as the guiding factor, what's going to make your customers happy. And then the other thing is it's a little bit like having kids. I don't know, are you a parent at
I
all?
am. I am.
You are?
Yes.
Okay.
I have two. Two. Yes.
So, I would say it's a little bit like in the early days when you have babies or little kids, it feels like the world is just overwhelming and overloaded. But you kind of know a few years on, it all sort of works itself out, right? It like kind of takes care of itself. It works itself out as you're growing. And I'd say that, so don't worry so much, right? So that's kind of another piece of advice. It's like, it might feel like crises all the time, but don't worry quite so much. It tends to have a way of working things out, especially if you've been focusing on making customers happy, that these things correlate a little bit, right? So,
I definitely agree. That is really good. And so have there been like any I guess points of inflection or any kind of secrets that you've uncovered that have kind of taken you from, hey, look, we're doing okay, through to, wow, okay, we've just hit a really solid growth curve. Like this, this thing, this strategy, this event, this mindset shift has really taken me to a new level.
there honestly hasn't been any major breakthrough or aha moment like that. It is 1,000 small steps and 500 sliding backward steps, but then 1,000 forward steps, right? I mean, it's just that incremental, you know, we're a software house, we make software. The engineers are doing a release every other week or so. So like every other week, the product is getting a little bit better, even if it's some
Mm,
micro thing you don't even see. Maybe it's something a little larger. We just did a huge update to our database of investors. So that's a major thing, but
mm,
it's also 10,000 micro things. So every 2 weeks, the product is getting better. And you multiply that over a period of years, it all adds up, right? And I think that same sort of thing applies even with marketing and even our podcast. I mean, our podcast is like I said before the call, it's kind of a hack job, an amateur job, but it's way better now than it was when we started, only because we've just kind of figured out the right questions to ask and the types of guests. So it's all just little iterating and getting a little bit better every day, every hour adds up over the long term, right? So
mm.
yeah.
It's kind of that, getting 1% better every day, week, month, and then over the course of time, suddenly you're, 500% better
Yeah.
overall. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's good. I like that. And so what's like for you, what's been the most challenging part of growing the business?
Yeah, I mentioned the resource constraint. That's always been an issue, and you always want to do more than you want to spend more on marketing and ads. You want to hire more engineers, and of course, if you have resource constraints, you can't always do that. I'd say the other thing is just I hate it when we lose customers, when we
Mm,
when customers churn, and we're always trying to figure out like why are they churning, what could we do better. You're not always going to win all those battles because sometimes people just don't have any money anymore and they can't pay you even if they want to, right?
mm,
But kind of like the ongoing battle of against churn has been a challenge. um I can't point to anything else that's really been hugely challenging other than like occasionally running out of money and just keeping the lights on, which we've already talked about. So
yeah, yeah. No, that's good. And Nathan, I've worked with a lot of software companies, and a lot of them are very product focused.
yeah.
Have you like found a nice balance between kind of, the marketing and the customer acquisition side and then developing the product? Have you found that over the last 5 years you've been more skewed toward product development? Like, is that just, the natural human condition of developing a new product? Like, where has your focus been, and what have you found has been most effective?
Yeah. Well, one of the best things I did early on was hire a product manager, right? That was an early
Mm,
hire, kind of at the MVP phase when I was paying for all this out of my own pocket. I was the product manager, and I'm terrible at that job. So, I would say if that's your core expertise, great. If not, finding a product manager to kind of manage the product is huge. But then for us, so that's been kind of nice, having a product manager really worrying about, keeping that development cycle happening on a regular basis, that 1% improvement every week or whatever. Um, and then that way, like, I'm a business guy. I'm not an engineer. I'm not a product guy. I even tell I'm a product manager, like, don't ask me for, you want me to make a decision about colors or layout or some, don't ask me. I will mess up the product, right? So, kind of keeping that siloed away from me. But I think I'm pretty good at generally hustling and, trying out a lot of different marketing experiments. I mentioned we have a podcast. We try, one thing we've done a little bit is every kind of a New Year's resolution is like, come out with a new marketing experiment. Like, let's try something new every year. This year we tried YouTube ads and they weren't super effective, but previous years, I guess 2 or 3 years ago, we were like, let's try having a podcast. And that's turned into like a um, really great boon for us. And then we discovered, oh, we've got all these great people on our podcast. We can also repurpose that content and get hire people cheaply to transcribe the podcast into text and have someone else edit that text, and now we can like guest publish that into as an article on TechCrunch, right? I mean, so you're kind of discovering, experimenting leads to discovery, and then you kind of double down on things that work, and that's what's really fun to me. So I don't know if I even answered your question, but
that's good. I like that. Yeah. Right. And so if you could go back to the start, if you could go back 5 years ago and give yourself one piece of advice, what would it be?
probably I would probably even, given everything I just said about how fun it is to do marketing now, I would say 5 years ago, focus more on product. We were, even 5 years ago, when the product was rough, we were trying to do a lot of marketing things. I hired a PR firm. That was a terrible decision. I hired a PR firm when we were basically brand new, and it was the worst money I've ever spent, right? Because we didn't have any news to report. We didn't have many customer successes. They didn't have the raw materials they needed to do their PR job. And so it just became, so, my point is we were marketing where we really weren't ready to market, right? You don't hire a PR firm if if you're not ready for that. Um, and so I would say, just Nathan, focus on getting the right product manager in place, getting, good designers and the best engineers you can afford and find, and focus on product probably for the first year or two versus trying to do all this wacky marketing stuff. We were going to conferences and tech conferences and setting up booths and stuff. And we put the marketing a little bit too far ahead. And I know this is contradictory to kind of what I just said, but like, you have to have something people really want and will stick around for before you can really crank up your marketing, in my opinion.
Mm. And it's a really delicate balance, isn't it? Like between getting the product right and making sure that that your new clients, you'll retain those, and focusing on marketing and making sure that you are getting that customer acquisition down pat as well.
Yeah, yeah, and you got to figure that part out. It's just, if your bucket is super leaky and you're spending $5,000 a month on Google ads, that is literally throwing money away,
Mm,
because
mm.
yeah, so
Yeah,
it is.
exactly.
But it doesn't mean you shouldn't experiment a little bit with Google ads or Facebook ads or whatever, right? Because you got to kind of learn and adapt. But I have seen a lot of startups. I've been working with startups for a long time, and that's a killer. One of the common killers of startups is like, product isn't really there yet, but they're trying to compensate by spending on marketing, and that's that's tricky.
Yeah,
So
it is. It is. Okay. Nathan, just indulge me with this question. Lion or elephant? Which one and why?
that's a great question.
And
uh,
and there is no right or wrong answer.
I'm going to go elephant. They seem like one of the smartest animals on the planet. Kind of methodical. They have that memory supposedly that can even sometimes be passed between generations, if I understand it correctly. And there's a wisdom there that I think is kind of cool. So that's why I like elephants.
Yeah, great.
Lions are pretty cool
That's
too,
good.
but yeah.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Literally everyone has a different answer to that. So it's a really good question. Just kind of, I guess shows us inside your mind, I guess, a bit. Yeah, it's good. Um, so Nathan, just finally, who can you best help? And if they want to get in touch, how can they reach you?
Yeah, I started this because I love working with startups. I love working with entrepreneurs. I love the energy around that. Um, I am happy to help founders, especially thinking about fundraising. I can't always do like one-on-one advisory. I get asked to be an advisor and stuff like that. I can't always do that just because of time constraints, but I love helping. And oftentimes I can point people in the right direction if they're, learning about raising capital. Um, we've created a ton of content about how to do it, and interviewed a couple hundred founders on how they raise capital. So I can often point people in the right direction. So yeah, if people are interested in learning how to raise capital, or maybe they're in the middle of raising capital, getting stuck, reach out to me. If they're, in the very smart process of building relationships with investors, I can kind of coach them on that a little bit. And if they've raised money, happy to hear from them. And it'd be fun to possibly feature them on our podcast, which is all about fundraising. So yeah,
Absolutely.
like, mhm.
And a website or a phone number, or email, how can they best contact you?
Sure. Website is foundersuite.com. That's www.foundersuite.com, Foundersuite. And email is just Nathan at. So very easy to reach.
Yeah,
Nathan at
great.
Foundersuite. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you. Nathan, it's been amazing having you on. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me, Ryan. I appreciate it. And this was a joy. Enjoy the rest of your day in Brisbane.
Thank you very much, and we'll speak soon.
Okay. Cheers.
Bye.